welcome at this Show Me How To Bouncing Back from Failure. Today we have Maxime and Luca, and if they are here today with us, it's because they both crashed their previous startup. And today they are going to show us how their mistake was, how they could have avoided them, and what they learned from it. By the way, guys, if you have any question, you can just write it down in the chat. And at the end, we will have discussion moments, so do not hesitate to participate. Maxime, Luca, before going more into these steps, could we have some information about yourself? Like, who is Maxime? Who is Luca?
So nice to meet you all. I am Maxime. As we speak today, I am co-founder of a second startup after the ones that failed and that we're going to talk about. It's a company called Visual AI. We're developing generative AI algorithms to help fashion brands build try-on experiences for their e-commerce websites. So basically, it allows any consumer to choose a model he or she identified with and style and outfits directly on that model. We are currently incubated at Station F at ADN IFM with Creative Valley, and I am based in Paris.
Nice. I don't know if Luca is back, if he can hear us.
I think I'm back. Yeah, actually, where did it stop before, Adrien?
At the beginning.
Oh, okay. So I just said I had a French accent, and then it stopped, right?
Yes.
Cool. No, anyway, thank you everyone for being here. Sorry, I don't really know what happened. Let's test. Should be better now. So I'm Luca. I'm half French, half Italian. At the moment, I'm head of growth in a company called Scalingo. Scalingo is a platform as a service. So what we offer is web hosting for developers, where you don't have to handle any servers. But yeah, today I'm not here to talk about this experience, but to talk about another experience when I was the founder of a company called Brewation. And Brewation was a craft beer distribution company. Basically, at the time when we launched this company, we wanted to change the world of beer, and things didn't happen as expected. And I think Adrien has a couple of questions about it, so you'll learn soon more about it.
Yes. By the way, how many years have you been working on this company, or how much time?
So Brewation was 2 years old when we stopped. And actually after that, the company changed in another way because basically I transformed the company into a blog. And now it has become a side business that I'm just handling on the side and it's generating some revenue, but I'm not like full-time on this project anymore.
Okay. All right. Because when you launch a startup, of course, there is up and downs. And so you had this up and downs, but did you feel like at the really moment you were losing the control?
Yeah, I can start. We had a conversation with Maxime already about the subject. So I think actually when I look back, we really lost control after 4 months because what happened at the time is that we started this company with like literally no money. We had like 4,000 euros on the bank account, no money from the state or anything. And it was like really not well planned. Like really, we were missing a lot of experience when we started this. And basically after 4 months, obviously you kind of need to get some money somewhere. And we started as a marketplace. So we were basically selling beer online. This was like a model that was very scalable, but we couldn't live with this. And so we started like going a bit crazy. Like we started to test plenty of business model at the same time. We lost a lot of focus. We lost one co-founder on the way. I mean, he's still alive, but he left the company after 4 months. And I think that was like really the point where we lost control. And I think we kind of knew it, but we never wanted to recognize it. And we tried everything we could, but yeah, it didn't go well after that.
All right. And what about you, Maxime? How much time did you work on your previous startup?
Yeah, so first of all, the startup was in a food tech. It was a food advisor connected to Facebook Messenger. And the service was to re-enchant the cook at home at night. So the service was we sent recipes to a bunch of users 3 times a week. And when people cooked our recipe, they would gain points and reward that they could convert into reward at food retailers or any other company. It was called which you could translate yummy in English. It was Eat Better with Max and Hugo. Hugo was my ex-co-founder. And we worked on the company 2 years on my side, and my ex-co-founder worked in the end 2 years and a half. He continued 6 months after I left. And I wouldn't say that I lost control of the company. It's not a sense like of losing control, but at some point I didn't had a clear vision of the road to success. When I start a company, and the last one I started, I pretty much have a clear vision of where we want to go and how we can go to achieve this vision. But with the previous one in the food tech, at some point, it was either I mean we were somehow crashing, and the investment ecosystem told us that we could succeed by investing millions and millions in marketing and acquisition. And for me, it was just beyond my level of risk. I was not launching a company for burning cash, a lot of cash every month to acquire customers. And I had this like little vicious, voice in my head who told me, God damn, it's very risky, and it's not something that I'm comfortable with. So it's not like a sense of totally losing control. It's more a voice that was getting louder and louder every day, telling me that it was not going to succeed.
Okay, do you regret to didn't try to go more ahead, or?
No, actually not. I think for me it was a good timing. I reached my limit at this company, and actually there's something I plan to talk about later, but let's tackle it now. Like, if there is a difference between perseverance and obstinacy. So in French, it's perseverance and obstination. And I think that we persevered a lot in this company. And for me, I had reached the point where I considered that it was obstinacy and stubbornness and not perseverance anymore. And actually, now that I'm launching a second company, and especially with American VCs, they value a lot the fact of stepping down of a company which I think it was going to crash. It means that in the end, you have a red alarm in your head saying, okay, danger, you should leave now. And at some point that you need to stop burning cash and stop wasting your time. And there is also something called the opportunity cost. That when you're doing something, you're not doing something else. And especially when you're an entrepreneur and you give 100% of your time and energy in something, it's a waste of time and energy if you continue 2 months, 6 months, or 8 months more than what you expected. But actually, we should have asked my ex-co-founder to join. Maybe he would have a different point of view on the topic.
All right, thank you very much. What about you, Luca? I saw you wrote a document on LinkedIn, like you put, I think, 30 points, like 30 mistakes you've done. What's happened to you?
Yeah, I think indeed, and actually, if you go to my LinkedIn profile, and everyone can find this document. So yeah, basically, I think actually for me it was quite special. I know some entrepreneurs, they would close their company, and at the moment they close, they directly start the process and they start like thinking about it, doing some kind of introspection, like, okay, I know I kind of know that I missed this. And for me, it took me a lot of time. Like, it took me almost 2 years before having like a clear idea of what I missed. And I didn't want it to have like 5 things, like, like finance or something else. I wanted something more precise. So that's why I wrote this big document like that. That's like 7,000 words, I think. So it's pretty good read. But yeah, anyway, I think Maxime is really right, in the sense that I have no regrets. Like, that was an amazing adventures. I think there was no, at this moment in my life, there was not a better way to learn things about myself and to learn things about having a company. I think for me, at some point when we realized that we had to stop, it's simply when we had no more ideas of things we could test, So basically, we tested everything. We tested like being a marketplace and selling beer online. Then we tested B2B, and we started to go to every bars to try to sell beers. And then we started to be like a beer box, so you could get a beer box every month. And everything we tried at the moment was not working because we were missing the marketing knowledge, we were missing sales knowledge. And yeah, basically at some point we just realized that you shouldn't be stubborn, you know, you should just like move on and go to see some other people and learn from them and see how they succeeded their startup.
Okay, so basically that was more the business model who wasn't like ready and the product market fit.
Yeah, I think more than a product market fit, it was a founder market fit at the time, because basically when we launched the product, like the marketplace to sell beer online, like we had like, it was really working well. Like all breweries would call us and ask us, yeah, we want to be part of the brewery, of the marketplace, sorry. But I think us as founders, we had very limited knowledge. We were in a village in Alsace, where I'm coming from. So like we had no entrepreneurs around us, or the entrepreneurs we had around us were like restaurant owners, this kind of entrepreneurs, and we had nobody in tech around us. So whenever we had a doubt, whenever we had a question, we couldn't really turn around and ask someone. Like there was no Station F at the time, so we didn't really find solutions, you know. And yeah, I think it was more a founder market fit because we had like no knowledge on how to do growth marketing, how to do sales, and basically I think we needed to learn a bit more before launching a company again.
Okay, great. Yes, yeah. In your document, by the way, you were talking about like organizing a startup outside of Paris. So in the campaign, and you were saying like it was very harder to do it like outside of Paris.
Yeah, I think it's so that's pretty crazy because I wrote that like, you know, it's just my opinion, and then everyone started reacting about it like, no, I think in Lyon you can do something, or in this city, whatever. And my point was simply to say that the people that will surround you once you have your company, once you have your startup, these people, they are very important. And you can find probably these people. I live in Strasbourg at the time, and I'm not Parisian or anything. So you can probably find these people in Strasbourg. You can probably find other startups in Lyon or wherever else you want to live. But it's just the fact that most of the startups in France are in Paris. So basically, if you have the opportunity to go regularly to Paris, you will have more opportunity to meet these people that will help you.
All right.
Then
so
we went like in a village, you know. So there was nobody else. Like we had entrepreneurs around us, but they had like old style business, like hotels, restaurants, shops, or that kind of things.
Okay. So, and if you were like now and you wanted to start the previous business you had, what different would you have done? Like going into an incubator or going into Paris? What would you have done different?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would have done differently would be to be in a big city at first. So at least a big city in France and not a village. And then definitely at least once a month, twice a month, try to go to Paris to meet other entrepreneurs that would have the same problematics that you have and the same questions that you have that can potentially help you.
All right. And what about you, Maxime? What would you have done differently?
Great question. So first of all, on my experience, also it was some kind of co-founder mismatch. The reason why the company crashed, and actually we've made many errors. Among them, we decided not to raise funds when we started the company, saying we're going to be great entrepreneurs and launch a super nice business model that's going to fuel the growth of the company. But we were B2C. We were on a new channel called Chatbots, which was a bad idea at first. With hindsight, it was a bad idea to launch a chatbot. And I think something that I would do differently now is going to see potential investors straight away, because when you talk to investors, especially business angels who are ex-entrepreneurs or who are entrepreneurs themselves, they give you great advice, and they think twice because they think about investing their own money, so they don't want to lose it basically. And that's actually when I went to raise fund that I received great feedback from the company, and that I totally agreed with the flow that potential investors were pointing in the company. So that would be a first, and second is we decided not to raise fund. It was a bad idea. We should, if not for advice, we should have gone for money, because with money you buy time, and maybe if we had more time, we would have lasted like let's say a year, a month, a few months more. And something differently maybe was not starting the company, and it's because at some point we were in a food tech, and the only people wanted to pay us to do what we did was mass retailers, grande distribution like Carrefour, Leclerc, Auchan. And actually, we started the company with my ex-co-founders to be an alternative of mass distribution. And at some point, we are facing two directions. Either we made money by making mass retailers pay us to entertain our community and continue the service, or we didn't, and basically we were crashing. And on my side, I was more eager to have a success with this company than not working with mass retailers. And my co-founder, it was really deep into him that he didn't want to work with mass retailers at all. So we had really like a situation where it was completely blocked, and that's also when I left the company, because it was for me like being dogmatic on his side, and I could not ask him to like renounce his values and to do something that he didn't feel confident about. And yeah, that's something maybe that if I had known at first that it was really deep into his values, maybe I wouldn't have started the company anyway. But I don't regret anything at all. It was a great experience. I learned a lot, and would do it again.
Thank you very much.
If I can add, maybe, sorry, Adrien, I think Maxime is raising a couple of good points. There's one first point that's really resonating also, which is the co-founder thing. And the second one is about money and raising money. So the first one about the co-founder, actually the same happened to us, because we were 3 co-founders. And at some point we decided to split, and so one co-founder left the company, and there were only 2 of us left. And basically it was a bit the same thing, because from the first day we knew we didn't have the same vision, because we talked about it, because one of the co-founders wanted to build more of a lifestyle business, you know, like some kind of business that you have on the side, where you don't have to work too intensively. Let's speak passive income business, this kind of business. And the 2 other one, we really wanted to build a startup. And we had this conversation maybe during the first months, you know, but we choose to ignore it just to continue, you know. So that was, I think, a big mistake. And then the second one about money that Maxime raised, which is, it's also very important, because in my case, we started with very few money. Which is okay. You can test a business with very few money, and you should test your business with few money. But at some point, you still need to pay the bills at the end of every month. So if you don't have any money, if you cannot raise money, and you cannot get money from the state, you should stay in your current job and just do this business on the side until you have enough savings. Because the problem is that when you have no money, every choice you make, you start to make the choice because for money reasons and not for your clients. So for example, in our case, when we started to do B2B, it's just because we started to sell beers in bars, because we know they were paying up front, and we know we could get money at the moment we would go there, you know, like you just bring like 2 big kegs and they give you 200 euros, and you know that this will help you at the end of the month, you know. So yeah, I think like having a plan with money and knowing what you need to live and what you want to do is very important.
Thank you very much. And yes, you said some advice linked to the previous startup you had. Like, if you had 5 advice to give to the entrepreneur we have today, because we have a lot of entrepreneurs in the participants, what would be the 5 advice or tips you want to give to them?
Yeah, shall I start? Yeah.
Yeah, start.
Yeah. So I think with Maxime we can probably give 100 advice different advices, and if we invite 2 other entrepreneurs they would have other one probably, but I think the first one I would give is really this idea of starting lean and testing your product very fast. Even if you continue your job, your day-to-day job, there are ways to organize yourself to start testing a new company or testing your product. Second advice I would give is really having other entrepreneurs that are having similar problematics around you, and also having entrepreneurs that are more experienced around you, because these people will help you to grow. So I think probably for those that are part of Creative Valley, it's probably it's probably perfect for that. And then my last advice would be really to launch the company that is right for you. So I talked a bit about lifestyle business, side business, passive income business. You can also launch a restaurant, a bar, if that's just more fitting what you need. But startup, it's a very particular kind of business. And I think Maxime, that is doing it for the second time, can probably say more about it. And you need to like that, and it needs to have, you need to be ready to spend a lot of time for that.
Okay, my turn. So one advice I would give is to share your problems with someone. And for me, when I started thinking about leaving and stopping the company, it was such a hard decision. It would take like 100% of my mind all the time, day, night, weekend, holidays, whatever. And you have a lot of people when you launch a company, especially when it's an early stage, that are, oh, it's so cool, the company you're launching and so on, asking you for news and stuff. And deep into you, you know that it's not so cool, that it might be going to failure. And it's very hard to carry that problems. So I would advise just to share with some like specific people in your network that you can tell to most of the people, yeah, it's great and so on, because you don't want each time you talk to someone to explain your problems. It's something that at the end of the day, it's like full of negativity and stuff. So you want to have like some light discussion and say to your aunt or so on, oh, yeah, no, it's great. It's a startup life is awesome and so on. But just pick some specific people in your network and share with them your problems. It's going to be like lighter for you afterwards. And also choose some people that are involved in your company, either investors or co-founders, obviously, but find some people who really like care for you, who will not only give you like generic advices, but will really deep dive into your topic. And in my case, my family invested in the company, and obviously I just couldn't imagine having discussion with my mother and father at a dinner on weekend to talk about that. It was like just too much for them. And in the end we took a coach. I mean, no, we had a coach from an incubator in Paris. He was called Hervé, and he really helped into like putting words into what we thought and making sure that the discussion between co-founders was possible. Because my ex-co-founder, he just didn't understand why I said, okay, I've reached my limits, it's too risky for me, and I think it's going nowhere, and I'm leaving. It was really hard for him to take that news, and with the help of the coach, we managed to really talk to each other and figure a solution. That would be my first advice. And second advice is make sure that you have a clear idea of when it's perseverance and when it's obstinacy, and when you cross it, and be honest with yourself that when you start a company, and if it's your first one, you really think that the success of your company is your success. So the failure of the company will be your failure. But actually, success of a company is a company, it's a project, it's like a brand and something, and it's very sad when it arrives. But you as a person, you are still alive, and you will work on other stuff. And I think for the second one, for example, maybe I put less emotion in the company, and it helps me go faster and maybe take more risk and be more successful. So yeah, don't think that your company is yourself. It's something that you dedicate your energy and time, but you're more than that, and you will remain after the failure of your first company.
And so, and this tips is like really important. Like when you had your bereavement, like le deuil, and you bounce back. So you said to yourself, all right, if my company crashed, but it's not because my company crashed that I'm bad or I lost everything. And I know you worked in a startup studio, like you had your first startup, then you worked in a startup studio. Was it like a great bridge, like in your entrepreneur path?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, when I left the first startup, I took 2 months off to just like take a breath, enjoy nature, and so on. And then it was in September. I knew that deep in myself that I wanted to be an entrepreneur and I wanted to start a new company, but I realized the risk it was to launch a company on your own. So I wanted really to do it, but with the support of a startup studio. And I had discussion in Paris with a few startup studios. And in the end, I started working as entrepreneur in residence in another studio. And what was great is that I started actually having some interviews, maybe 2-3 months after I left the company. And it was great to see that people valued the experience I had as an entrepreneur. And actually, startup studios, they only hire ex-entrepreneurs as entrepreneurs and residents and co-founders. I mean, most of them. And having worked 2 years on a company and having left the company before it exploded, and a few months later it actually crashed, was still valued as a great experience. And that's something that was very positive for me. Because even though that you haven't done a good financial operation at all, I was totally broke basically, and all your friends who are having let's say normal jobs, they kind of have some money, and you see like some kind of a difference of living between you and your friends. That's not something that's easy to carry on a day-to-day. But yeah, I joined the studio. It was great I had a salary when I was joining the studio, and that's super important for me. That when you maybe fail a first company, take an employee job, take your salary, cotise at your chômage in France, and then you'll have more money to launch a second one. So it was a good rebound, but it was not easy. Like with hindsight, I say it with a smile, but honestly, it's not easy. Like you feel like shit. You're like you talk about your company to basically everybody you know, and then when they will ask us, so how is it going? I don't know, I left, it crashed. It's not a nice period of your life.
And you look at what's happened for you, like, and when you joined Scalingo, did you say, all right, before I had the company, I crashed it? How they react, and yeah.
It's really good question, and many points that were raised from Maxime. It's like it's almost this very similar story. So at first when we stopped the company, I took 1 month off. So I really took off, like didn't do anything. The 2 first weeks were quite hard because yeah, you know, like your life is a bit empty, because for 2 years, like you have so much of your time, of your energy that is just focused on this thing, on this company. And after that, actually, I did something that I'm not sure it's quite usual, but I just started working in a bar. So I needed some money, and like I wanted something where I didn't have to use my brain as much as for other things, you know, because the bar, once you know, once you start to know the gesture and everything, you can kind of put your mind on off mode and just go for it, you know. So I did that for a couple of months, and then I really decided to go to a company that had already succeeded, like that was a startup and had succeeded, and I wanted to go abroad for some time. So I first actually went to Skyscanner, that's a flight comparator. So I went to Scotland. I lived there for about 2 years. And yeah, actually, when I was there, I told them, yeah, I failed the company before, but this is everything I have learned there. And it was a positive point for them. And even after that, when I found the job at Scalingo, same thing. I told them, yeah. And actually, they knew me because they are from Strasbourg. So everyone knows each other around here. So yeah, basically I told them, and actually it's a very good point. Every time I talk about it, everyone always has questions and everything. So yeah, I think I made it a strength, even though at the beginning it could have been a weakness, but now it's definitely a strength. Yeah.
And actually, that is something I don't know the word for deuil in English, by the way. If you have the word, Adrien, I'm interested to learn it. But we did it differently with Luca, because Luca, you wrote the article and like you made it not famous, but you told it publicly. And now that's something that's it's really part of your story, and it's something that I didn't do, and I'm not sure I would like people to remind me all the time that yeah, you're the guys who failed that startup and so on. And actually, my ex-co-founder kind of did it differently too, more on your style, Luca. And that's I think for me, I really respect that because it's great that when you fail, you talk about it, and it's something that I'm sure heard elsewhere, but like in the US, failing your first startup is more it's seen better than in Europe. Still, I don't know why, but for me, I really think it's true because I talked to a lot of American investors lately with Techstars that we did with my new startup, and like they really value that. So there is no problem of talking about your failure publicly. But for me, it was something maybe I needed to like put behind me, and I did my deuil. What is the word, Adrien?
I would say bereavement something, but I'm not sure.
Very okay. We'll check on the internet. But I did my day by protecting myself in my next adventure, not by writing and stuff. But and I'm happy to share my experience now, like in live discussion. But maybe if you haven't done it before, maybe if you fail, just write down stuff, even if you don't put it on a blog or on the internet, to maybe help you to go through. And one last thing we haven't talked about, maybe an advice I want to add, it's about the weak signals that life send you in your journey. And something that we agreed on with Luca is that we didn't listen carefully to weak signals from our co-founders in terms of human relation. And when you launch a company, you want to succeed so much that you don't listen to these weak signals. And maybe if we had listened to these signals more carefully at the beginning of the company, we would either have done things differently, or don't do things at all, or at least talk about it earlier. But when you are obsessed to success, you say, okay, my co-founder is like that. And I think there is a problem about it, but I will overcome that problem because I'm so eager to success, and that's really something that I think it's called experience. Listening to weak signals for me, it's called experience. And when you don't listen, then you pay it the next time you listen, and you maybe do things differently the second time.
I think whenever, if I can give an advice, it's really whenever you think that you have this thought in your mind and you say like, it's okay, this person will change. This means you should talk about it with this person because it means you're just trying to hide something to yourself. So whatever, if you are hiding something, I mean, we told our story. For me, from the first months, we knew we didn't have the same vision with our co-founder. And then there were other weak signals, of course, during the history of the company. But whatever, you're hiding yourself, you're hiding to someone else, I think in a company, it means if you're hiding something to yourself, you should talk about it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much. So we have 20 minutes left. We have few questions. Maybe Xav, if you want to ask your question to Luca and Maxime.
Hi. So my question was about when you go to see an investor or a bank, and you want to have money. Do they look if you have failed before or not? If you have, for instance, already had a bank lending you money and you have failed, maybe the bank don't want anymore to give you money?
On my side, yeah, no, on my side, I never borrowed money to a bank that I lost the first company, but I'm doing it now. So if my second startup fail, I can call you back and tell you what it is to lose money from the bank. So I don't have the answer, but no, when you lend money for a company through a bank, make sure that you have some like warranty from BPI, BPI guarantee BPI that if the company fails, you don't have to give the money back as an individual. And there are many banks in the country, so you can change the banks if you want, and don't tell them your story. Concerning investors, of course, they investigate what you've done before. It's not investigating; they just want to know who you are. So they want to hear about your experiences. And when you fail the company, what you learned, why did it fail, what happened, and so on. And actually, I mean, when you're talking to investors who invest in many different startups, you can be sure that they already witnessed some co-founders fights, they already witnessed startup failure. So you won't be the first one to come to them saying, "Oh, we have a problem." And they are startup investors, so they know that they might lose half of their investment or maybe more, and you should not like overthink about that. But what's important, and it's something that it's like let's say honesty with yourself, that you shouldn't like borrow money or ask for money when you know it's gonna fail. But it's a question of trust and confidence. And for me, at some point, I felt that we had some investors who were willing to invest, but I felt that I was just seeing their money to waste it, and that's something I couldn't do as a human being. And that's where my limits were. My limits were. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Yes, Luca, yeah, you can keep it. Yeah.
Yeah, if I can add on top of that, I think indeed we also tried to raise money at the time. We did several banks, and also a couple of investors. And I don't think it would have been a big problem if we had failed in a startup in the past. And so for the case of investors, I know it was not a problem with the investors we were talking to, and actually it would have been a plus if we had failed in the past. And with banks, I don't know my own story, but my dad's an entrepreneur and he failed the company at some point when he was like 22 years old, something. He's a bit older now, if I'm honest. But then he was able again to get money from the bank several times. So I don't think it's really something you should worry about.
All right. So even if you are looking for investors or if you are looking for a new job, for you, it's a good experience to at least have tried to launch a startup.
I think from what I saw, mentality have changed a lot. And I have, since I failed this startup, either in a job, either with investors or anything else, that had one telling me, you failed your company, so we are not interested in your profile or whatever.
Great. Robert, you also have a question?
Yes. Hi, guys. So I have a similar experience. This is my second company today, and you know, it's a bit of a different experience. Very quickly, we built it with a friend of mine. It lived for a couple of years, and we had a little bit of traction. And we were kind of like very excited, you know, during the initial setup of it, you know, the tool, the technology and all this kind of stuff, getting together with B2Bs and so on. Anyway, it plateaued at some point. And all we did for about a year was burn cash. You know, there was a little bit of income, you know, 500 euros here and there, and so things like that. And we're kind of like excited, okay, this is the beginning and so on. We did not see it coming. So it failed. You know, it lived for 2.5 years and it failed. I came out of it with an obsession with KPIs and OKRs and stuff like that. So my question to you is, you know, having gone through the same thing, what do you have any insights today about, you know, things that you are looking at on a daily basis to just make sure that you don't get into the same kind of failure environment that you don't see actually? I mean, you know, you gotta kind of like predict what the next step is going to be. a little bit better than you did with the first experience?
That's a good question. But for me, I think with hindsight, if I had put some great KPIs and OKRs in the first startup, I don't think it would have prevent us from the failure. So I would say like OKR or KPIs were the problem. But with the second one, I am really also fond of OKRs, for example, that I put in place in the company. And for me, it helps you make sure that you have clear objective and that you don't sleep too much. Let's say, you don't feel too comfortable in a rhythm that's too slow. For me, it's a huge risk in a startup. And maybe Robert, you were too slow during a period of time too long. And for KPIs, it's more objective than KPIs. To do KPIs, you have to measure something, and in the early stage startup, you don't have anything to measure at the beginning. But no, for me, it's not really linked. I wouldn't link success to OKRs. It's like it's a nice form of organization, but I'm sure you can succeed without OKRs. But of course, it can't help if you're building something to use this kind of OKR stuff.
Yeah, I think that's really good points. Yeah, on my side also, I didn't talk about it, but one of the reasons we failed our startup was also procrastination, because there were a lot of things we had to do and we were not doing what was the priority. And since then, what I have introduced for myself, for my personal business, for the company I'm working for, is always looking at the impact. And that's something I took from Skyscanner, which is really, you wake up in the morning, what's the thing that can have the most impact that you can do for the company? And literally, I have like this book here, and every day I'm asking myself this question for my side business and for the company I'm working for. So, it's not something you can really measure. It's more like, okay, today I want to, before I start, I will think what can have the most impact to my company today, and that's what I'm doing. Maybe it's just like sending some boxes. Maybe it's something a bit more fun, but yeah, that's a bit my way of measurement.
And actually, it makes me think of something that's 6 months or 8 months before I left, we had like a warning, and we've told ourselves, okay, what do we want to do before crashing the company? What are all the crazy stuff that you didn't want to do because you say it's too crazy or it's too risky or whatever? And actually, in the OKR system, an OKR should bring a new expertise or a new competence or a new strength to your company. So it's not something that's day to day. So maybe working with OKR, saying, okay, I have 6 months of cash. What are the 6 crazy things I want to do before closing the company to have no regrets? And that's, I think, a good mindset. And when you have a full list of a crazy objective in your head, maybe you spend less time on your current day-to-day job that is not paying off anyway.
Good point. Thank you.
Welcome.
The next question is related to your co-founders. Like, how did you meet them? Was it only because you had complementary skills, or was it your friends? Yeah, how did you meet them?
Okay, I'll answer. I try to be quick. First one, it was not a relative at all at first. I didn't know him before starting the company, and we started the company because we thought we shared the same vision at first, and in the end we realized that we are not complementary at all, that we were kind of doing the same stuff, having sometimes like different ideas, and so the collaboration was not easy. And the new ones, the ones I started my company with now, I totally took them for their expertise, of course, by making sure we share the vision, but we are like a full complementary team, and it makes things so much easier on that view.
Yeah, on my side, we were the 3 of us. We were working in a startup in Barcelona at the time. So that was also a crazy story, crazy company. We went from 5 people, and we were in these 5 first people to 150, and then we went back to 5. So that was a crazy experience there. But basically, we met there. One of them was developers. The other one, we were a bit business guys. So you know, we thought we have complementary skills, we are friends, so let's start a company together. But then again, and that's what Maxime said, we didn't have the same vision. And that's more of a big problem than at the end competencies you can always, and skills, sorry, you can always find it. Having the same vision, it's harder to find it because you will need to change one of the person in the company, and that can take ages.
Thank you. Romanic, hi, you have a question. So if you want to ask the question to Luca and Maxime.
Hi guys. Hi. You hear me? Hi. Hello?
Ouais, okay, go on, we hear you. I think yes.
Thanks guys for the talk. I did have a question about those weak signals we were talking about. What are succinctly three of them, the most important ones?
Yeah, okay. So for me, so the weak signals for me, it's a behavior from my co-founder. And I think he has a lot of perseverance, but sometimes can be stubborn. And it's good, you know, when you want to like sign a deal and so on, it's good to be stubborn. But when you have like a strategic discussion with your co-founder, then it's not good to be stubborn. And actually, it's funny because I talked about that with a friend no longer than 2 days ago, a friend of mine who left her company. And actually, we had the same experience that we witnessed some behavior of our ex-co-founders with other people, and we thought, oh my God, that's harsh. That's not how I would have reacted. I would have talked to that person, would have managed or so on. And you know, it's something you say, okay, but it's not on me. It's on other people, so it's less important. And in the end, I will tell him that he was asked on that time, and maybe he can improve and get better. But in the end, what we realized was it's really deep in our co-founder's character to be like that, and it's just not something that I can accept on the long run. And that's one argument to make sure that when you found a company with someone, when you start a company with someone, that make sure that you know him as a person, not only as a professional, because you can be a great professional, have super nice expertise in something very useful for the company, but you have to make sure that it's a good people behind the professional, and at least something. I mean, good people, it means nothing because we all have different definition of good people, but I think something that you can cope with and have a nice discussion and make sure that you have a good communication. And you have solo founders who I think, on my point of view, I would never, for example, I would never like start a company with super successful entrepreneurs I know, but who are solo founders, because I think it's just impossible to work with them because they just think they are like a king in their castle. And on the other side, yeah, so that's my answer. It's more like behavior. It's not expertise or competence.
Yeah, I think I can also quote some. It's always a bit related, but it's maybe a bit different. So for me, the first one is really this vision. So for example, in my case, one of the co-founder wanted to build a lifestyle business and work like 10 hours a week and have cash entering the bank. And obviously the two other one, we wanted to change the world of beer. So, you know, it's like, when you hear that, you know, it can just not match, you know. And then there was a second one, actually. At some point, we were counting, like we were trying to do some kind of a business plan. And we realized that per beer we were selling, we were making about like €4 per if we sold for €40 of beer, we were earning €4, you know. And basically we had a calculation, and we saw that we had to sell 1,000 times 40 to be able to pay ourselves. So just when you count that, and at the moment we were like at 30 times 40 instead of 1,000 times 40. So you kind of know that the way to get there is very long, and you have to be realistic that it's not going to be like that tomorrow you have 1,000 people buying on your website. It takes a lot of time before getting there. So that was a weak signal at the time. And then the last one is about what you're doing, and if you like what you're doing every day. And this happened to me when we started to go for B2B. So basically, I was just knocking in every door and just going around to try to sell beers. And I was not happy in the morning when I was waking up for that. It's not something that made me happy. And you know, after 1 month, you know that you don't like to do something. And then you just start pushing it away. And that's just a weak signal that it's not something you should do every day, because you will never be really good at it.
All right, thank you, Luca. And we have a last question from Yazen. Do you advise to raise money? And how do we know that we need to raise money?
I think I talked about impact, and that would be my answer. Raising money take time. You have to convince people. And that's like sometimes almost a full-time job, particularly if you don't know anyone at the moment. There are plenty of reasons for raising or not raising money. I think Maxime can tell a bit more about it. But the question I would ask myself is really like, how can I have the most impact on my company? Is it by spending my time to raise money, or by developing the business and talking to clients, or maybe just by sending boxes every day? Like, that's how I would approach the question.
Yes, well, I think it's a topic for another webinar. And I'm sure, yes, you can find some great webinars about whether or not to raise money. On my side, when you have a startup idea, early stage, first you have to confront your idea to the market. So potential customers, potential clients, that's the most important thing. And afterwards, if it's a company in the startup mode where you know that if your ambition is to take the market, and if the only path to take the market is to go fast, and it's kind of winner takes all, or at least winner takes a big part of the market, and your ambition is to take the market, you just have to raise money. Otherwise, it's another company that is going to raise money that is going to take the market. So it's not a personal question; it's a question of your market dictating what you should do. But for me, one of the great aspects of raising money is that you receive a lot of feedback from investors that already invested in your market, that already seen maybe companies doing the same thing that's the one you're trying to build, and who failed, who succeeded, or who at least they have learnings to share, and that's super insightful. And in the process of trying to raise money, you'll meet some people that maybe will not invest now, but we can invest tomorrow. And actually, two of my investors in my new company, I had met them in the first one and they refused to invest, and I didn't know them at all. And the second one, they said, okay, the first one was kind of like of shitty, but I didn't want to invest, but now it's a strong project. I'm going to give you some money. So you never know. The network you're building when you try to raise money will always be useful in your life as an entrepreneur. So it's feedback, network, but it takes time, and you shouldn't raise money too early, maybe, because you're going to be defocused on your business and on your potential clients. So it's a risk. And honestly, I myself like it. I like the process of fundraise. So for me, it's good. But yeah, another topic. Guys, I need to jump on the call.
Yeah, thank you, Maxime. That's a great conclusion. Maybe if someone has any question, they can find you on LinkedIn. And by the way, guys, your feedbacks are also important for us.
Patte.
Yeah, and Luca Fancello.
Yeah, if you want to reach out to discuss it one-to-one on 15 or 20 meetings, honestly, don't hesitate to do it. If you attend this webinar, it means that there is something in your mind, maybe you feel it coming, or maybe it's a little voice in your head. And honestly, the best way is to talk about it. And we don't know each other, so it's going to be even better, because maybe we won't see each other after the discussion. So we can openly discuss like 15 minutes at the psychiatric. But really feel free to do that. And thanks for the invitation, Adrien and Luca. It was great to meet you through this event. Hope we can share a beer soon.